Good evening, folks, and welcome to the live stream. I hope you're all very well this evening. Let's see who we have on tonight. We have Jared Mack, great to see you. Amac C, great to have you on. Hope you're well. Hammy, great to see you on. Hope you're well too. Dave T is here. Colin, greetings from New York. Hope you're well over there in New York. We also have Neil, who lives in New York. This is from William. Welcome, William. Great to see you on the stream. We have a Raven 1983 Witch. Great to see you too. Hugo is on. Great to have you on. The Freckled Bunny is back once again. Great to see you. We have, let me see, Master Templar. Great to have you on. John O'Sullivan is here. Indie Truck Davy is on. Great to see you, Indie Truck Davy. Make sure to check out Indie Truck Davy, the Two Davies channel on YouTube. We also have Roisin, great to see you, Roisin. Chatty Rat is here. No DLC, great to have you on. Hope you're well tonight. Akismad is on. Great to see you, Akismad. We also have Eddie Wolfie, great to see you. Stefan is here. Victor is on. Great to see both of you. Daniel is here too. Great to see you. Bina Mac, great to have you on once again. We also have Cthulhu. Good to see you, Cthulhu. Hope you're fine. No singing tonight. We have CGM. Great to have you on, CGM. Hope you're well. Claire Sweet. Great to see you. Hope you're fine tonight. We also have, let me see, Killer. Thanks for moderating once again, Killer. Vin Wright is here. Woods Boy Me is here. Riggin Elite. Great to see you. Hope you're well. We also have Coral Reefs. John 259 is on. Number 3, great to see you once again. Hope you're fine tonight. And so many more. Hope you're all very well. Hope you had a nice weekend and you're ready for another week of madness. Where to start? Well, maybe it's best to start with... No. Oh, wait a minute. I have to find the article. Oh yes, here we go. Boris Johnson referred to police over fresh claims of COVID lockdown rule breaking. Oh my goodness. So Boris Johnson has been referred to the police by the Cabinet Office over new claims he broke COVID lockdown rules. The former Prime Minister's ministerial diary has revealed visits by friends to Chequers during the pandemic. The trips to the countryside residents were highlighted during preparations for a public inquiry into COVID. The Cabinet Office has passed concerns to the Metropolitan Police and Thames Valley Police. The Privileges Committee, which is investigating claims Mr Johnson misled Parliament over Partygate, has also been informed, according to The Times, which first reported on the story. The news has sparked calls for Mr Johnson to step down as an MP. But sources close to him called the referral clearly politically motivated and claimed the Cabinet Office did not give him any notice so he could put forward the facts before the report was made. Mr Johnson has been advised by lawyers that the events were lawful. Once again, so we have Boris Johnson breaking the law, breaking the rules, and what's going to come of it. Well, it'd be great now if he was to be forced to resign as an MP. You know, get him out of office, get him out of the House of Commons. Boris Johnson needs to go back to what he was doing before, writing lies in the Daily Telegraph. It's better to have him there than to have him anywhere near number 10. And of course, you know, we saw recently there was the convention to bring back Boris. What was it? The Conservative... the Democratic Conservative Convention, or Democratic Conservative something, or Conservative Democratic something. Anyway, it was the Boris Johnson fan club. All the big names were there, Nadine Dorries and others. So is this politically motivated? No, it's not. It's just Boris Johnson's lies and shenanigans catching up with him. Johnson the third that won't flush, said Brad. Yes, unfortunately, you can keep flushing, but he just won't go away. He just keeps returning, unfortunately. Yeah, the Tory Nazi something. that was the other part. That was the other convention. That was the one after the Boris Johnson Brigade one. That was even more extreme. So we'll have to keep an eye on this, whether Boris Johnson will eventually be forced to resign. We'll have to wait and see. Okay, so just want to cover some of the big stories for today. Summary here. Suella Braverman, the Home Secretary, has rushed out fresh curbs on international students who come to the UK to study in the UK amid growing pressure on the Home Secretary over her conduct in office. So she needs a distraction. So what was the distraction? Oh, we're going to clamp down on students, international students. Yeah. Number 10 has rejected claims that Rishi Sunak is dithering as he considers whether to order an inquiry into claims that Braverman broke the ministerial code by asking officials to arrange private speed awareness course for her. Once again, he's demonstrating a complete lack of backbone, and of course he's afraid to fire Suella Braverman because she has a lot of support within the Conservative Party, not so much in the House of Commons, but within the party. And there's a risk that if he did fire her too early and her support was still quite strong, he could be in trouble. The International Monetary Fund has upgraded its forecast. Andrew Bailey, the Governor of the Bank of England, has insisted that inflation has turned the corner, despite the UK being hit with the fastest annual growth in food prices since the 1970s amid the cost of living crisis. So inflation is continuing to rise, but the International Monetary Fund has upgraded its forecast for UK growth, saying the country will no longer fall into recession this year, but warned the government against cutting taxes. Against tax cuts, it said, would fuel inflation and result in a long period of high interest rates. So it's good news if the economy hasn't fallen into recession, but one figure I did see was that the population has increased, so GDP may actually have fallen, but I don't know if that's really the case. But it seems that the UK has avoided a recession, which is, of course, good news. And you don't want to be going into a recession. But the growth figure is something like 0.4%, so it's not massive. If you were to, for example, compare it to Ireland, the growth rate in Ireland is like 12%. But then when you strip out, for example, the American companies that are, of course, part of that massive number, it's something like 5%, which is still a good growth figure. Ministers are to double funding for the government's flagship tutoring program. Okay, so this thing about Braverman. Braverman announced new limits on overseas students bringing family to the UK. Suella Braverman has rushed out stringent curbs on international students who come to study in the UK amid growing pressure on the Home Secretary over her conduct in office. Once again, as I said, a distraction. Well, I'm in a bit of bother. Let's throw some migrants under a bus. Throw some students in particular under a bus. Under proposals released in Parliament on Tuesday, overseas students... here's just a question, and I just wanted to put this out before I continue. This week, Labour were talking about changes they want to make to the NHS. Now, I'm not going to go into the details about the changes, but the first question they received over this was, how are you going to pay for it? Which is a legitimate question. But do you notice that any time the Tories talk about, well, we need to stop the boats, we're going to cut NHS waiting lists, we're going to do this, we're going to do that, never have I ever heard a journalist ask, how are you going to pay for it? So why is it that when the Labour Party presents something, a policy, or any opposition party, the first question from journalists is, how are you going to pay for it? But when the Tories present a policy, how are you going to pay for it is never asked. Anyway, I just wanted to put that out. Under proposals released in Parliament on Tuesday, overseas students will no longer be able to bring family with them except under specific circumstances as the government seeks to reduce immigration numbers. Why? What's the motivation here? Why do they want to reduce immigration numbers? People coming over contribute to society. they contribute to the taxpayer, to the exchequer. These are people who bring money with them and they spend it in the local economy. Why would you be against family members coming with students? And it's not that they're moving to the UK and staying in the UK permanently. When the visa runs out, then they return to their home country. But they're bringing money in. Why would you be against that? Especially, when, the economy is in and out of a recession. Only overseas students on courses designated as research programs, such as PhD students or research-led master courses, will be able to bring dependents with them under the new law, under new rules to curb net migration. Reacting to the proposals, the lecturers' union said that they were deeply shameful and anti-immigrant. They were deeply shameful and anti-immigrant, while universities said they would disproportionately affect women and people from certain countries. Nigeria has the highest number of dependents of student visa holders in 2022, with 60,923. Indian nationals had the second highest number of dependents, with an increase of 3,000 from 3,135 in 2019 to 38,990 in 2022, followed by students from Pakistan, Bangladesh and Sri Lanka. It comes as Braverman, who committed to reducing immigration to tens of thousands, braces herself for figures released on Thursday that would show net migration to the UK is more than 700,000. Once again, they set these arbitrary targets. They can't meet them. They know they can't meet them, but it's all about, grabbing a headline for the day and then forgetting about it until the reality hits them over the head. The policy was released in a written ministerial statement as the government answered an urgent question on whether Braverman told officials to organise a private speed awareness course in breach of the ministerial code. Downing Street has rejected suggestions that Rishi Sunak is dithering over whether to launch a formal inquiry into Braverman's conduct. Well, is he going to do it? We don't know. Of course he's dithering. Will he do it? He might. Will he do it? He might not. Of course it's dithering. Yeah, it's like... Oh, God. Alistair, thanks so much for that super chat. Look, squirrel, not speeding fine. And actually, the point of all of this is not so much the speeding fine. It's that she used her position as Home Secretary to ask, and used that to ask civil servants to provide her with a solution to a private problem. Civil servants are not paid to get involved in the private business of ministers or secretaries of state. How many times have you heard from Brexiteers or the right-wing media or Tory ministers or Tory MPs, browbeating the civil servants, calling them lazy, calling them work shy, calling them the blob? It seems to be the case that, the blob is quite useful when, you want to avoid the embarrassment of, doing, trying to sort out your problem, your legal problems. Once again, thanks, Alistair, for that. But this is the distraction. The case of making life difficult for students who are coming to Britain to spending huge amounts of money in Britain. Well, we need to make their life more difficult. Why? Because Suella Braverman is in a bit of a spot of her own making. Now, some people want to just move on from this. Here we go. I just want to show you this clip with Nick Ferrari, our old friend Nick Ferrari, who's tired of not tired of corruption, but tired of people talking about corruption or such issues.
What she did was she requisitioned a civil servant to do her personal dirty work for her. That is a breach of the ministerial code.
We're waiting to see if it's a breach of the ministerial code. I mean, the reason that, of course, these people have their aides is to allow them to function in these fairly important, high-profile jobs. And I don't want to be rude, but the mundane activities of where she has to do the course, how she does the course, is left to someone to try and resolve.
Nick, it wasn't
Yes.
her aide first. She asked the civil servant first, who wasn't her aide. Then she went to her aide. And right-wing journalists like yourself who continually try and trivialize these stories. You did it with the Boris Johnson, Sue Gray palaver. You do it all the time with these stories.
Because
and actually,
no one
what
cares.
It does,
David.
yeah, but I care.
Well,
And I'm fed up of morons coming on your show telling me what the public think when
my
I'm
dear
the
chap,
public.
listen to the BBC. They're obsessed by it, so don't worry.
Don't
They
care about
won't.
the
They won't
BBC.
let this go. Don't worry about it. There's plenty of coverage. It's just
Listen.
I think it's interesting, and I know that they don't necessarily meet everyone's news judgments, but the editors of all but, well, actually, there's no one front page story, as in the main story now for Suella Braverman. There's single columns on a couple of front pages, and that's it. The world has moved on, David. No one cares.
What he's trying to do here, of course, is to convince people not to care. Just stop talking about this. Let's talk about something else. Why? Because it's affecting his team. Nick Ferrari is on team Suella Braverman. Nick Ferrari is on team Tory. So he doesn't want people talking about this. Let's move on. No one cares. He doesn't care. He wants people not to care. Is this affecting people's ordinary lives? Of course not. But this is undermining democracy. This is where you have a government minister abusing their position, breaking the ministerial code. What's the point in having a ministerial code if people are able to break it and not get punished? This is Nick Ferrari for you. Pancaking on. Thanks so much for that super chat, Tories. We need to motivate people to come over and invest. So that's why we can't tax the rich, except for you, foreign students. Yes, we don't want to tax the rich because that goes against our ideology. But taxing students, perfectly fine. Make life difficult for them. We don't want them coming over here. Students bring over more money than non-doms, of course. And who have the Tories been defending over the last number of years? The non-doms, not the students. Of course, the non-doms don't bring in money; they take money out of the system. Trivialities. Move on. Nothing to see. Yes, it's once again it's Nick Ferrari defending Team Tory, and it's disgusting to watch. No, there was a story here I wanted to cover before we move on. 80% of voters, including 55% of Tory supporters, think Britain needs fresh team of leaders, poll suggests. So the polling firm Ipsos has published its latest political monitoring polling roundup. There is a faint glimmer of hope for the Conservatives in the voting intention figures, which, while still giving Labour a big lead, suggests that it's been shrinking a bit in recent months. And this is to be expected, okay? As we get closer to a general election, the Labour's lead, according to polling, will narrow. It will get to a stage where it'll be, 50-50. It won't be so clear who's in lead. Like, as long as Labour maintain some sort of consistent lead, they'll be okay. But then this is off the entire country. Okay, this is polling generally for the public. It's not polling of marginal seats, for example. And of course, the Labour Party are focusing on the marginal seats. Too much disgust of many people. Not talking about Brexit, not talking about raising taxes, not talking about funding the NHS in the way that many people would like them to do it, but instead they're taking it very, very easy and not saying anything too radical. Nick Ferrari is the biggest white noise on radio. Well said, Brad. Yes, he's pathetic, and it's. I have to ask, why does he have his own show? What does he add? Sometimes it can be funny listening to some of the things he says, but he doesn't really add anything to the discussion. He's not challenging people. When it's somebody on his team, he definitely won't challenge them. He'll just let them run. But if it's somebody, protesting or somebody who complaining about Brexit, then he'll push back. But even on those issues, he seems to have got a bit lazy over the last number of years. Thanks, Brad. David McGuinness, hung Parliament coming. That would be very interesting. Very interesting for political observers like ourselves. Labour are expected to win a massive majority. If it was a hung Parliament, it would be embarrassing for Keir Starmer. David, you have some people who agree with you in the chat. I think we're too far out for polling like this to be taken seriously. As we get closer to the election, the Tories are going to pull out all the stops. They're going to use whatever dirty tricks they can, and it's possible that it could end up being a hung Parliament. Hung Parliament, of course, would be the best for democracy, because then you would have the Labour Party having to form a coalition with probably the Liberal Democrats, and maybe having some supply from the SNP, but definitely not a coalition with the SNP. If Labour got 30% of the vote and the Tories got 30% of the vote, the Tories would win by with more than the seats in Wales, Northern Ireland and Scotland. Yes, that's the problem with first past the post. It's designed to help the Tories in a sense, and this is what's so frustrating about the Labour Party over the last number of years, why they have been resistant to proportional representation. Fearless Wolf, thanks so much for that super chat. If Keir Starmer's curry with colleagues is worth 12 Daily Mail front pages, Boris Johnson has been referred to police over COVID rules. Has been referred to police over potential COVID rule breaches. Yes, is this going to appear in the front page over the next 12 days? I don't think so. It'll be a footnote. That's all it will. That's all it'll be. Thanks for that, Fearless Wolf. And yeah, it's not going to get any real traction. People have moved on, as Nick Ferrari likes to say. Of course, the people who lost loved ones during the pandemic have not moved on. And rightly so. David, once again, thanks so much, David. Sir Keir, Red Tory, promises broken. I think it's of course, he's not very well liked in Scotland, and he's not really reaching out to people in Scotland. I don't know what the Labour Party can offer the Scottish people. The policies don't seem to be all that progressive in respect to the SNP. The SNP is a much more progressive party, and they're not offering independence. So I do think Labour will pick up a few seats in Scotland because of, perhaps because Labour will do well in England. And unless the SNP are able to turn the boat around, because they're under attack. I don't know if they're losing support, because some polling suggests that the SNP support has actually gone up. But independence seems to be off. There's no mention of independence at the moment. So as we get closer to the general election, I imagine the SNP is going to start talking about independence, and perhaps this polling will all change. Just a bit more on this. It says, thanks for that super chat. But most of the other charts in the document will make grim reading for Rishi Sunak. Perhaps one of the most significant one is this one, showing that 80% of people and 55% of Conservative supporters think Britain needs a fresh team of leaders. This matters because time for a change is one of the strongest campaign messages in politics. Yes, so, people will say, well, people are not happy with Keir Starmer either, but Keir Starmer's not Prime Minister. So if people are tired with the current batch of politicians, it's worse for the incumbent. Because people would prefer, it's no longer better the devil you know. Definitely not. People want change. And this is what I've said before. Keir Starmer doesn't really have to do any campaigning. He just has to let the Tories burn themselves out. Crash and burn. He needs to sit back and let them lose the election. Because that's probably what's going to happen. People are tired of the Tories. They want change. And it's important that the Labour Party, if they want to win, they need to engage in tactical voting with the Liberal Democrats and to a lesser extent with the SNP. But with the Liberal Democrats in particular, there are a number of seats that they could take if the Liberal Democrats convince their supporters to back the Labour Party. If they don't, then there's a risk that, as was pointed out earlier in the chat, that if the Labour Party gets something like 30% and the Tories get 30%, the Tories hold on to the seats that they won in 2019. I don't know any devils, Max. I guess that's because I am the devil. Oh my God. Moving on to Northern Ireland for a moment. David, thanks so much for that super chat. That's not correct, Max. Humza has pushed India every First Minister's questions since he became First Minister. I really need to start watching. Thanks for that, David, and thanks for that correction. I haven't seen any real polling about independence support. Is it going up? Is it going down? Is it staying steady? So I need to look into that. I just get the feeling that he doesn't have the same clout as Nicola Sturgeon had. And I guess it's still early days. He needs to get comfortable with in the job. And he needs more time to be able to make a name for himself. He had massive shoes to fill. And as somebody who supports Scottish independence, I do hope that he is successful in that. But I still see a lot of sniping from within the SNP even, or at least within the independence movement, directed at the First Minister. Things like that. He doesn't care about independence, or that he's not good at his job. He's not able to sell independence to the public, that he doesn't have a plan. So that's what I've been hearing online. But of course, what you hear online is not always what's the situation on the ground. Thanks for that correction. Thanks for that, David. I thought I heard a buzz, but maybe not. The SNP aren't complete independence movement. No, they have other policies, of course. Anyway, I want to talk a little bit here about the DUP and the DUP wanting money. Again. Still 50-50 over 22 polls, Max. So John Curtis, UK top pollster. Then it really hasn't changed. So that's... So if people still support it, even with the change of SNP leader or First Minister, which was a fear that many people had, that get rid of Nicola Sturgeon, support for independence would go down, because they would see people would be some people would be turned on. Of course, most people who support independence, it's irrelevant who the SNP have in charge or who's the First Minister. But there was a fear that replacing Nicola Sturgeon could impact negatively the independence movement, but that doesn't seem to be the case according to polling. Thanks for that, David. Ninja, thank you so much for that super chat. Boris Johnson has been reported to the police over fresh Partygate allegations at Chequers. It's never ending with this man. No. And he's just had a new kid, they've announced another kid, another little Boris. This is probably 27 now, is it? Or 42, I don't remember how many kids he has. Max, the SNP are just a vehicle to Indy. Maybe I'm looking at, unfortunately, I'm looking at it through the through the Westminster prism. The idea that if the SNP are doing badly, it means that the independence movement is doing badly, which is obviously not the case. The polling doesn't support that at all. I've been watching too much Westminster bubble media, I think. I fear many votes in Scotland might not know the independence conference is even happening if they rely on broadcast media and the press to tell them what's going on. That's why they need to check out channels like Indie Truck TV and the Two Davies. Who's paying Johnson's legal fees? Still us? Yes, unfortunately. Thanks for that super chat there, Ninja. So Jeffrey Donaldson signals he expects cash for Northern Ireland to be part of the UK offer to get DUP to resume power sharing. So Jeffrey Donaldson, the DUP leader, has signalled that he expects extra cash money for Northern Ireland to be part of a package of measures from the UK government to end the deadlock at Stormont and lead the DUP lifting its boycott of power sharing. So this was never going to be a surprise, the DUP putting the handouts. And then, of course, if the DUP get some sort of package, they will do a victory lap saying, see, we got the British government to give us this money, and then people should be praising us. We've thrown Northern Ireland under a bus for the last 2 years, but now we got some cash, and aren't we wonderful? You don't have to thank us all at once. We're discussing a range of issues with the government, not least our budgetary challenges in Northern Ireland, as well as the need to address the problems created by the protocol and where we feel the Windsor Framework falls short of providing that solution. As the quantum for the financial package for Northern Ireland, there is nothing clear at this stage, but I think that what is evident from the Treasury is that they want to see proposals from Northern Ireland about investment to reform our public services, as well as giving us the extra funding we need to deliver for those public services. The government knows what is needed, and I believe the government will bring forward what is required. So this is his attempt at give us money, give us cash. The DUP has been refusing to participate in power sharing for more than a year because of its opposition to the original Northern Ireland Protocol and revised version, the Windsor Framework. In a report for Politico last month, Sean Potkanik said the UK government could end up spending around £1 billion on Northern Ireland as part of an effort to get the DUP to lift its boycott of Stormont. And people, what should people think about this? People should be pretty angry. The English, Welsh and Scottish taxpayers are compensating Northern Ireland because the DUP are not doing their job. Pumps, thanks so much for that super chat. I'm happy to pay for Boris Johnson's vasectomy. I'd consider it part of my national duty. We need to have, that's a great idea, the Boris Johnson vasectomy fund. We'll have a jar that we can put money into it, and then have him brought to some clinic, dragged by his heels if necessary. It would be doing wonderful things for the climate. It would be doing wonderful things for Britain. No more Johnsons. It'd be a national duty. Last week at PMQ's, Oliver Dowden, the Deputy Prime Minister, did not mention finance, but he did say in a reply to Donaldson that the government was willing to legislate to give the DUP the assurances it wants about Northern Ireland continuing to have access to the UK market. So the DUP say, yeah, we're going to come back, but we want some money, sweeten the deal a bit. And you remember a few years ago when Theresa May was Prime Minister, in order to keep the DUP happy, she gave them £1 billion. Not sure where that money went. Was it spent on holidays to Sri Lanka? I don't know. Anyway, let's move on. So, on the issue of the economy, are things improving or are things getting worse?
It is higher than we expected to be, and there are two underlying reasons for that we see in the data. One is food, and the second one is some goods, particularly clothing and footwear. Now, I should just make the point that it's interesting to note that those are not the elements of inflation that we regard as the more persistent elements. That's more in the services sector, where so far it's tracking more or less as we thought it would in February. But we have seen, you're right to say, we have seen these upsides on these particular two areas.
What's gone wrong then, either with your models or with your network of agents? It's not something that any of us would have found surprising, that food prices, for example, were persistently strong, that our farmers were telling us about how much inputs were costing them and things like that. Something has gone really wrong with your modelling and with your network of agents, which is meant to give you this edge in terms of information.
On food, let me say, it's obviously a question that we've spent a lot of time on, as well as you can imagine. What I would say is that back in February...
2023?
Yes, this year, sorry, yes. The contacts that our agents were talking to, this was a point when food price inflation, I think, was around 15%, if I remember right. That's the food element. And the contacts were telling our agents that they thought that was the peak and that it would come down from there onwards over the rest of this year. Now, you're right, that has turned out not to be the peak. We've invested a lot of time and effort, including me going around the country, talking to the contacts again to say what has caused this to happen. I should say that they remain of the view that it is going to come down. But it's gone up in the meantime. Now, there's two reasons that I would say, or two groups of reasons. They give and they say, look, they were wrong in this view. The first group is things that I think it's reasonable to say couldn't have been expected. In other words, events that have happened in the meantime in certain elements of food. And they're mainly weather events around the world, frankly. So there was a well-known thing with vegetables in, I think it was Morocco in particular.
Yeah, but that lasted a few days. How can you apply that to inflation? We have to realise, of course, that Andrew Bailey is a Brexiteer. So he's not going to talk about Brexit. He's going to try and find reasons why inflation has increased, but he won't mention Brexit. Oh, it was a weather event. Remember, it was a weather event. That's the consequence. That's why food is more expensive today. The weather event happened, when was it? About over a month ago. Roisin, sorry, missed your super chat. I don't think Northern Ireland can function properly whilst within the UK, to be honest. When you have the likes of the DUP pulling the plug because they don't get their way and they throw a tantrum and pull the plug, then Northern Ireland is not going to function. And every time the DUP do this, they're demonstrating that Northern Ireland can't function within the United Kingdom. It's broken. They're actually playing into Sinn Féin's hands, because Sinn Féin will say, look, Northern Ireland doesn't work. What's the point in having Northern Ireland? If we were part of a united Ireland, there'd be no need for an assembly in Belfast. There'd be no need for an executive. We could close it down and turn it into a museum. Everything would be done from central government in Dublin. So what's the point? You wouldn't have the DUP pulling the plug every 2 years or whenever, over flags or over the Irish language or over whatever. Thanks for that, Roisin. The DUP are constantly demonstrating why the union should end. I'm not saying that I think it should be up to the people of Northern Ireland, but it's like the DUP are not doing themselves any favours here. I don't think Northern Ireland can function properly whilst the DUP are around, to be honest. Yes. Night Raven, thanks for that super chat. No, the DUP, and I said this before, when it came to Brexit, their hatred of Europe and Ireland blinded them and is greater than any love for the union. They care more about not being part of Ireland or not being part of the European Union than being part of the United Kingdom. They should be embracing the Northern Ireland Protocol with both arms, both hands, grabbing it with both arms, embracing it, because it gives Northern Ireland that unique position of being able to access both the internal market and be part of the single market when it comes to goods. No other part of the world has that. And if you don't believe me, ask Rishi Sunak. He's the one who promoted it and got a bit of flack for it. But this is something that the DUP should be running around holding up as an example of why we need to be part of the union. Thanks for that, Night Raven. We have a super chat also from MS. Thank you so much, MS. Brexit issue not in the press. UK used to sell cream to the EU. Now trapped lower farm profits, so have to raise price of milk and can sell so cheaper. A big problem, of course, with as I covered in the video a couple of days ago, and the farmer pointed out perfectly, is that all of this extra bureaucracy comes at a cost. If it's about bringing in workers, if it's about selling goods into the single market, all of this is an extra cost, and farmers are already struggling to cover their costs and pass on those costs to the consumer. And the customer in this case being the supermarket, they don't want to pay any more, as they're in a price war with other supermarkets. So the farmers are stuck between a rock and a hard place, where they're seeing prices of their raw materials, their price of fertilizer, price of energy rise, and they're trying to sell their product as cheaply as possible, because the supermarkets know that, well, if it's too expensive to buy from a British farmer, we'll just import it from the EU. And the longer this goes on, the more detrimental it is to British farming. But the press aren't really covering it. That's a big problem, yes. In my opinion, biggest problem in Northern Ireland is having to appease thugs with nothing but threats of violence as talking points. I hate the DUP and what they've done. Yes. The DUP have a long history of egging on the worst people in society, and then the next day condemning that action, and then egging them on the next day after that. The DUP are stuck in the 17th century, 1690 to be precise. David, once again, thanks so much for that super chat. We woman from Nottingham, England, doesn't want Northern Ireland. Please go, Fleck Shaggers, Nolan Shaw. Yes, and I had it on the last live stream, I believe, where the Mary from Nottingham, I think her name was, originally Irish, I believe, but she was complaining about Northern Ireland, and and while not everything she said was true, the feeling in England in particular is, why are we paying for this? We get nothing out of this relationship. We have these crazy Irish people at each other's throats. Some of them say we're not Irish, the others say we are Irish. We can't tell one from the other. We asked them, how are you British? And they said, well, we put on bowler hats and wear orange sashes. See, we're British. That's not British. It's cosplay British. Because if Ian Paisley visited London and people didn't know who he was, they'd say, well, you sound Irish. He wouldn't like that, but that's the reality. Claire Swede, thanks so much for that super chat. Great to see you on the stream once again. I said hello earlier on, but great to have you on once again. Hi Max, BBC Northern Ireland finally discussing New Ireland today after striking an election day, so no coverage. I think they're realising the way it's going to. Yes, there was a time in the past where talking of a united Ireland was completely taboo, and the mainstream media is starting to realise that the writing is on the wall. The demographics are pointing to a united Ireland, and the shenanigans of the DUP, and we saw with the local elections in Northern Ireland recently, where there's greater support for Sinn Féin. But Sinn Féin are not just the party of a united Ireland, but they've become a party of everything. And it seems that there were unionists voting for Sinn Féin because they like Sinn Féin's policies. So Sinn Féin has, in a sense, transcended republicanism and become a mainstream party, but maintained that republicanism and are still pushing, of course, for a united Ireland. And I think a united Ireland, while in the past was something, as I said, taboo, and linked deeply in the mindset of many people with the IRA and terrorism, Sinn Féin have actually, in a sense, convinced the public that there's nothing to be afraid of. And it won't be a sectarian Ireland, it will be a welcoming one, where unionists and the unionist identity will be respected. You know, the unionists, like the DUP, I'm not saying all unionists, but the unionists in particular, like the DUP or the TUV, they see nationalism, Irish nationalism, as the enemy. And they don't want to see it welcomed in Northern Ireland. They're tolerating it because they don't have a choice. But if they were in charge, they would not tolerate it. That's the difference between them and Sinn Féin. If Sinn Féin are in power, they're not going to say, you're not allowed to fly your union flag on your house or whatever. You can't, have your Orange March. They're not going to stop that because there's no benefit for them stopping that. They said, we're past that. If you want to celebrate that, okay, that's fine. But it's, we've already achieved our goal in a united Ireland. Thanks, Claire. We have also No DLC. Thanks so much, No DLC. A gift with love for reading a lot of my chats out for free. I love you, No DLC. It's great to have you. You've been following the channel for so long and you've been on the live streams for so long, so it's the least I can do. Thanks so much for that. Very kind of you. You always have very interesting things to say. David, once again, Shinners have become the SNP civil national. Yes, very good point made. It's Sinn Féin have become like the SNP, and the SNP in Ireland, where nationalism is not this. In the 1970s, the DUP under Ian Paisley Senior, his mantra was, they were trying to get, the Republicans were trying, and many Republicans are actually atheist, okay, but the Republicans were trying to drag Northern Ireland into a papal state. This idea that, and Ireland was a very religious country at the time, and there was this idea that, well, if a united Ireland, Protestantism would be wiped out. Protestants would not be able to practice their religion. Now, in the Republic at the time in the 70s, there wasn't this issue, but it was part of the propaganda of unionists. We need to maintain the status quo here in Northern Ireland because Protestantism would be under threat. But Sinn Féin, of course, is a-religious. It's not a Catholic party. It's not a Protestant party. It's not an atheist. It's more an atheist party because it's a socialist party. But they're not anti-religion. They understand the value many people see in religion, be them Catholic or Protestant. Like the Wolfe Tone, the one of the fathers of republicanism was a Protestant. It's not the case that republicanism is Catholic. Real republicanism is atheist, is secular. It's not religious. So I think people still latch on to the republicanism of the past or this pro-papism of the 19th century. But that's not the case today. And if you look at Sinn Féin, they're gaining a lot of support because they're talking about bread and butter issues. They're not really talking that much about constitutional issues, but they're talking about housing, they're talking about cost of living, they're talking about people being able to pay their bills, pay their rent. These are issues that are affecting ordinary people. And that's why more and more support is going to Sinn Féin. But the mainstream parties in the Republic and in Northern Ireland will of course say, well, a vote for Sinn Féin is a vote for the IRA. But it's wearing thin, especially with the younger generation who never never lived during the Troubles, but also see through this crap, because a vote for Sinn Féin is not a vote for the IRA. Moving on. I hope I read out everyone's super chat there. So just a little bit more on the economy here. So it seems that a recession has been avoided.
More breaking news to bring you. The International Monetary Fund has said it is not now expecting the UK to enter a recession this year. Well, joining me now is our economics editor, Ed Conway. I mean, Ed, quite a few other forecasters have said this year. IMF playing a bit of catch-up here, is it?
Yeah, I mean, it's a big change from their previous forecast. But to be honest with you, and, I remember we had exactly this conversation about the reliability of any forecast right now, to be honest with you, but in particular IMF forecasts, the last time they made a forecast about the UK, which was to say that Britain was going to face the weakest economic growth in the G7 this year. That was widely reported at the time. It was what the IMF was saying, and it was quite a big, it was a big call to say the UK was going to have a recession, and then most other countries around Europe and indeed the rest of the industrialised world were going to do a lot better. But now it's pretty much a reversal of that. They are saying that the UK is not going to face a recession this year. It's going to be 0.4% growth, not very strong growth, but nonetheless a lot better than the minus 0.3%. I think it was minus 0.5% previously. They upgraded it a little bit, and now they've upgraded it even more. And also there will be other potentially economies within the G7 which will do worse than the UK this year. You were just talking about Germany. It looks like German growth is forecast by the IMF to be kind of close to zero. So the UK at 0.4%, as I say, nothing to write home about, but nonetheless a lot better than we previously saw.
But you have to ignore the data from last year. So last year the UK was in a worse position than the other G7 nations. So now the UK is in a better position than it was last year, and this has been sold as a victory. Yeah, it's better than not being in a recession, but like if you start from the very bottom, of course the only way is up.
It's actually no longer the worst performance in the G7 in 2023. So that will be seen as a big victory for Jeremy Hunt, or, well, I mean, a minor victory, but nonetheless a victory compared with where they...
No, he will do a victory lap. He will say this is a massive victory. See, we're the fastest growing nation in the G7 once again.
Were before. The big picture, though, the UK pretty much kind of, if not flatlining, then very weak growth for the next few years. Still very high inflation. In fact, they've pushed up their forecast for inflation. They say the Bank of England may have to do, or they're recommending the Bank of England should do more interest rate hikes. You can see Andrew Bailey, that just there, is being quizzed by the Treasury Select Committee right now. And inflation's still a big pressure in the UK. But really, it's that big headline number that I imagine most focus will be on. So much noise. I think it was towards the start of this year when the IMF said the UK was going to fare the worst in the G7. Well, that is no longer the case. They say the UK, it's not necessarily going to be going gangbusters this year, but at 0.4% growth, no recession, and no longer the weakest growth in all of the G7.
See, the problem with all of this is whether the UK was the fastest growing nation in the G7 or the worst growing nation in the G7. How do ordinary people feel about this? What is the experience of ordinary people? Do they see the economy growing? Do they see, prices rising and their wages matching that? Of course not. So the economy is growing somewhat out of the doldrums, but inflation is still eating into people's wages and their power to buy stuff. So I'm not trying to be doom and gloom here, but the reality is that, yes, the economy is slightly above zero, and that should be welcomed, but it's not something to write home about, as they said. Rising interest rates is a disaster. No recession, praise the Lord. The Tories will do a victory lap, of course. See, there is no recession. We're doing wonderful. We're the ones who you need to vote for. But people are going to look around and see shops closing. They're still going to see the value of the money in their pocket getting weaker and weaker by the day. Literally by the day in some cases, as in regards to food prices, things going up really quickly. Now, of course, the response from Tory MPs is, why don't you buy the cheaper brand? See, we've given you Martin Lewis style quality advice, money saving advice tips. Just buy the store brand there. You shouldn't be poor now. Guys, okay, let's take a short break, a comedy moment, and then we'll be back with the serious stuff in just a jiffy.
Look, it's really quite simple. If you are posh and middle class and you think society should be more equal, then you're a champagne socialist, and that's pathetic.
And that discounts my opinion.
Of course it discounts your opinion. That's a nice view from your ivory tower. Grow up.
What if I were poor and working class?
Well, that's the politics of envy. You don't want to see anyone else achieve just because you can't. Let us live, you Grinch.
What if I grew up poor but became wealthy?
Well, then you've betrayed your working class roots and you simply cannot be trusted. Look, it's simple. If you are any of these three groups, you're automatically discredited. It's a crying shame, but those are the rules.
What, you made up the rules?
Those are the rules.
Those are the rules. No, Cthulhu, no. Just keep your money in your pocket, please. UBI, folks, yes, UBI would sort out a lot of people's problems, of course. And we're seeing AI, replace many people's jobs, and AI is going to replace a lot of jobs. Unfortunately, it's not going to replace what's his name, the guy on Good Morning Britain, not Jonathan, what's his name, Richard Medley. Unfortunately, it won't replace him, but we can try. And as jobs are outsourced to AI, I've reached out to a couple of people on the issue of AI. Hopefully we'll be able to get somebody on the Sunday roast to talk about AI. But it's no singing. Okay, so let's focus on this Brexit related story. Anti-Brexit protester Steve Bray vows to continue despite planned crackdown. I remember we had Steve on the Sunday roast a couple of months back. It says the anti-Brexit campaigner Steve Bray has said he will not be deterred from his long-standing protest outside Parliament, as ministers were accused of an unprecedented attempt to restrict repetitive demonstrations. The government is seeking to use so-called Henry VIII powers to allow police to quash protests that were with a cumulative effect can be shown to have been having more than minor impact on people's daily lives. What is his He stands outside Parliament with a loudspeaker. How is that disrupting people's lives? Under the charge, the police would be able to put a condition on protests such as Bray's, taking into account the duration and content of it. Bray, 53, from Port Talbot, could face potential arrest if he breaches the terms set by the police. The move opens the possibility of an end to Bray's 6 years of amplified anti-Brexit protests outside Parliament, in a development that would be welcomed by many people in the Palace of Westminster, but which is the cause of alarm among free speech campaigners. Where are all the Toby young people, the free speech brigade, when it comes to Steve Bray? You never hear these people. These people who claim to care about free speech are happy to see Steve Bray be put in prison. They would love to see that happen because they're Tories. They pretend to care about free speech, but in reality they don't. A true free speech advocate also advocates for speech they disagree with. Pumps, thanks so much for that super chat. As the cheap beans went from 21p to over 50p, more than 100% inflation. Sure, let's buy the value stuff. We're already buying. That will fix it. Some people would say, oh well, 50p, it's not that much. Yes, but that's for one item. If you're buying two items, the same item, if you're buying bread as well and milk and other things, it all adds up, and people end up either having to leave stuff behind because they can't afford it, or eating into other parts of their budget when it comes to paying the bills or paying rent or something like that. I'm making very difficult choices. Do I feed my family today? Do I feed myself today? Or do I focus on paying the bills? Free speech for me, not for the typical Tories, yes. The attempted law change has been criticised as the backdoor attempt to pass legislation that has already been rejected. Last year, the House of Lords voted down the provision of such powers to the police by 254 votes to 240, after ministers sought to bring in through amendments to an Act of Parliament. Subsequent effort this month at securing the same outcome through the statutory instrument, which the Lords does not traditionally vote down, has prompted both the advocacy group Liberty and the Lords Committee to raise concerns about the potential abuse of power. Yan Pang from Liberty said it was particularly egregious move by the government. It is the first time this has happened, offering at least possible scrutiny for something that has been rejected already. She said, "It's a blatant attempt to restrict the right to freedom of expression." In a report published on the 11th of May, the House of Lords Secondary Legislation Scrutiny Committee wrote, "The Home Office has not provided any reasons for bringing the measure back in the form of secondary legislation, which is subject to less scrutiny." Wonder why. So soon after they were rejected in primary legislation, we are not aware of any examples of this approach being taken in the past. So this is about shutting up Steve Bray, because many Tories don't like Steve Bray and they don't like to be challenged by Steve on the street. They want to be able to go about their business without, being called out for, destroying the economy in particular. You don't need AI to write a Tory speech. Any idiot can do it, says Peter. Well said, Peter, yes. Thanks for that super chat. But on the serious thing, AI is going to revolutionize people's lives, honestly. I've seen some of the stuff it can do. If free speech is banned, can we get away with sign language? People were arrested for holding up pieces of paper. What does that tell you? Blank pieces of paper, nothing written on it. You won't be able to do that soon. Okay, moving on. The NHS. The Tories, of course, running down the NHS. NHS dentist number in England at lowest level in a decade. This is something that needs to be presented in Parliament, mentioned in Parliament. Rishi Sunak is under pressure over his claims that the state of dentistry, as figures reveal, the number of active NHS dentists in England is at its lowest level in a decade. But the population has increased, leaving millions of people struggling to get checkups or have toothaches fixed. The British Dental Association has warned of the exodus of dentists from the NHS as it published figures showing that the workforce has been reduced to a level not seen since 2012-2013. The whole thing is, well, just go privately. That's the Tory response. If people can't afford, if there isn't a dentist in your area, an NHS one, well, then just go to a private clinic. Yeah, what's the problem? Yeah, it'll cost you a few grand, but if you're a Tory minister or a Tory supporter, you're generally able to afford that. Sunak has repeatedly said that 500 extra dentists have been recorded as providing NHS services in the 2021-22 financial year. 500, but is that enough? This is the question that needs to be asked of politicians. Is it enough? When Rishi Sunak talks about, we've hired an extra 20,000 police officers, is that enough? We're spending an extra 500 million on this scheme. Is it enough? Growing number of dental surgeries do little or no NHS-funded work, with the BDA citing a 3 billion dental budget that has failed to keep pace with inflation and population growth over the past decade. There we have it. The population has increased. Inflation makes it more expensive for dentists to operate, and the budget has remained the same. So the dentists aren't able to do the work. They can't do operations at a loss because they have to live as well. They have bills to pay. So the Tories don't want to invest extra money. They're keeping the budget as it is. And it means that fewer people are getting the treatment that they need. David, thanks so much once again for that super chat. The Cold War taught us not to stifle free speech. Yes. You know, but Brexiteers want to live in the North Korea of Europe. They want to have, you know, their own brand of media. They want their own brand of civil servants. You know, the civil servant. We've heard this week how the civil servants are supposed to do what the Tory minister tells them to do, and keep quiet about it. A total of 23,577 dentists performed NHS work in the 2022-23 financial year, down 695 on the previous year, according to a response of a Freedom of Information request from the NHS Business and Services Authority. That figure is more than 1,100 down from the pre-pandemic numbers. So the numbers are continually going down, but it doesn't mean that people don't need... It's not that people's teeth are getting better. People still need treatment. They need checkups. They need to be seen. And, you know, dental work is extremely expensive. That's why it's important that people are able to access NHS services, which are free. But if the budget hasn't increased, then it means more and more people are being either going privately or worse. I covered it on the channel before. I think it was a live stream a few months back, where people are resorting, I should say, to DIY dentistry. People pulling out teeth with pliers by themselves. And then ending up in hospital, ending up in A&E, where they put an extra pressure on the NHS. So the Tories are not providing the funding necessary for people to be able to access for free dental services. People are resorting to pulling out their own teeth, then ending up in A&E because they, you can imagine what happens. And then the NHS has to pay a higher price because treating people who've attempted to pull out all their teeth with the pliers is extremely expensive. Instead of funding it correctly in the first place. But then this is part and parcel of what the Tories have been doing over the last 13 years. Not funding stuff correctly and relying and hoping people and expecting people to rely on the private sector. Tory dentistry, pliers and a bottle of scotch. Yeah, we have to laugh. Otherwise we cry. Thanks for that, Freckle Punny. It's... Maybe gin. Nigel Farage is selling gin, so maybe that would be the that'd be the prescription. A bottle of Nigel Farage gin that I don't know if it would soothe the pain, but it will definitely take the taste of blood out of your mouth. Oh my goodness. Moving on. Thanks for that super chat.
This week, official figures are expected to show that net migration to the UK has hit close to 1 million people, which would be a record high. It could spell further difficulty for the Home Secretary, Suella Braverman, who's having a bit of a week of it already, and it's only Tuesday. Chair of the Migration Advisory Committee, that's Professor Brian Bell, is with us. Hi, Professor, it's good to see you. Thanks for joining us on the programme this morning. Kit Malthouse, formerly a minister, of course, he tweeted yesterday saying, students shouldn't be included in net migration figures because they help the economy. Where do you stand on that?
Students shouldn't be included in net migration because they help the economy. How does that make sense? What is he trying to get at here? We don't want to include people who help the economy, but all migrants help the economy in some way, or are trying to help the economy because many of them want to work.
I I think that's a slightly odd perspective. Workers help the UK economy. We include those in the statistics. The statistics are calculated by the Office of National Statistics using international standards. It's probably best not to fiddle around with how we calculate statistics.
By people who don't understand statistics. But once again, we don't include them because they contribute to society. We only include people who don't contribute. But the only people who don't contribute would be asylum seekers, because they're not allowed to work. Now, some of them do work because they're desperate, but generally, asylum seekers are not allowed to work. So you're only going to count people who come into the country and don't work.
How do we calculate the statistics?
So essentially, any migrant who we expect, when they arrive, we expect them to stay here for a year or longer, gets counted and in the net migration statistics. And any migrant who comes with an expectation they'll be here for less than a year don't get included.
OK. What about people who come on small boats?
Well, if they apply for asylum, then they'll be counted because asylum applicants are expected to stay for longer than a year. So, yeah.
So that means that most people who come over on a small boat are counted in these figures?
They should be.
But they're only a tiny percentage
Absolutely.
of what the figure is?
Yep.
What? No. Hey, wait a minute. Slow down. The Tories have been telling us that the country has been flooded by people coming in small boats. But now you're telling us that they represent only a small minority? What? I'm shocked. Well, not really.
So what do you expect the figure to be?
Oh, I mean, I'm not going to try and guess that. I have no advanced knowledge, but I think it's fair to assume it's going to be significantly higher than the 500,000 it was last time. Probably most people seem to think around 700,000.
Or perhaps even up to 1 million.
Perhaps that would be... I'd be quite surprised if it's that high, but we'll see on Thursday.
OK. Lots of cabinet tensions about foreign students. I know we touched on it there, and whether they're good enough, that they're good money for the UK or not, and whether they're filling essential vacancies or not. And then the counter-argument to that is that there are enough Brits here in order to fill those jobs. No. But if there were enough Brits to fill these jobs, then why haven't these jobs been filled? Why are businesses still struggling to get access to the workers they need? Why are businesses closing down because they can't access the workers they need? Why are some businesses reducing their workload because they can't get the workers they need? There's a worker shortage. Like this, how long will it take? You have the Tories saying, well, we shouldn't be bringing people in from abroad because we have people who are unemployed here. Okay, well, how long is it going to take to move those people out of unemployment into these jobs? Like, you've had, 2 years now since Brexit? You could argue, like, this was not a requirement of Brexit. You could have done this, when the UK was a member of the European Union. Like, the European Union doesn't say you're not allowed to train up people within the local workforce. So why didn't they do that? If they said, look, we don't want to be relying on the European Union, then why didn't you train up people over the last 13 years? Or at least since 2016? Because it costs money. And the government don't want to spend money, especially on training. So they want businesses to spend the money on training. But the businesses don't need... Why would the businesses spend money on training British people if they can get workers from abroad? Please stop saying abroad, Max. It's a woman. What? Okay. The hamster was a little bit slow to catch on there. How do we square that circle? Because it does seem that politicians don't seem to be able to do it.
Well, I think students... I think you should think separately of students and workers. So students, are coming here. The vast majority of visas that are issued to students are for the actual student to study at university. And the government's own strategy is to have 600,000 international students in the UK. That's the international education strategy that the government is pursuing. The universities have responded positively to that, and we've got 600,000 students. So, in some sense, the numbers have gone up because the government have had a strategy that says we want more students, and the universities have done that. And the evidence is absolutely clear. The advantage to the UK economy, but also to the educational experience of British students, is positive when you have international students in the classroom.
But we're an overcrowded little island, is what some people would say.
Well, that's a question about how big the population should be. And, in some sense, that's a perfectly legitimate discussion to have.
Then why did we hear Tories at the the NatC conference, saying that the population is declining and British people need to have more children. The same people who are saying Britain is full, the island is full, stop all these people from coming in, are the same people saying that the population is declining, we need to have more children. Well, which is it? The country is full or the country is empty? Because those two issues are mutually exclusive.
There doesn't seem to be much sense about that discussion. I mean, what is the right population for the UK?
Well, David Cameron, some time ago, told us when he was in power that he wanted it to be down into the tens of thousands net migration. We're up to potentially 1 million.
That's right. I mean, of course, the government doesn't...
Because as the economy grows, you need more workers. If you want to grow the economy, you need workers. You need people to do the work. If you can't find the workers in the local area, then you bring them in from abroad. And there are huge benefits for a country by allowing people to come in, because you have people who arrive on day one with all the education paid for by another country. If you want to look at it in those terms. So if you have, for example, a doctor, it takes, depending on the qualification of the doctor, depending on the specialization of the doctor, but we're talking about 7, 8, 9, 10 years to train up a qualified doctor with a specialization. If that doctor comes from another country, that other country has paid for all of that training, and you benefit from that. Now, it's not always a good thing, because it results in brain drain, and the other country ends up losing huge amounts of money and losing doctors, for example, people that they need in their country. But if you want to look at it as an issue of you getting doctors from abroad, this is hugely beneficial. Or any sort of skill. It doesn't have to be a doctor, it doesn't have to be something humanitarian, but it can be, computer programmer, or some sort of specialist, or some truck driver, or anything that requires any sort of training. You bring those people in trained already, then it saves you time and it saves you money. But people don't like that for some reason. Because people voted for Brexit because they wanted to see fewer foreigners in their town centre. They wanted to hear fewer people talking foreign languages. But now with Brexit, it means that more people are coming in from other parts of the world. So I don't think the racists and bigots who voted to keep foreigners out are going to be too happy with seeing foreigners from other parts of the world coming in instead. Because many businesses will get the workers. They'll pay more for it, but they will get the workers. Brad, thanks so much for that super chat. No immigrant has taken your job. You were laid off by a capitalist who wanted cheap labour to increase profits, and nothing makes him happier than hearing you blame the immigrant and not him. Well friggin' said, Brad. 100%. Yeah, the politician wants you to be angry with people who have no power. The capitalist wants you to be angry with the person who has no power. If you look at, the Daily Mail, the Express, the Sun, Tory politicians, they will convince working class people to be angry with people who have less than them. You're struggling to get by, but what about that immigrant? People, I'm going to tell you lies about that immigrant, or that asylum seeker, that they're put up in a 4-star hotel, that they're getting free meals, that they're getting everything that you're not getting. And you have to be angry, but not with me, because who's responsible. No, you have to be angry with the person who I have put into that position. And I've made rules to stop them from working. They're not allowed to work, so they have to rely on what I give them. It's like the protests, and I covered this before, and I talked about this before. If you look at the protests taking place outside, and it's happening in Ireland as well, it's happening in other countries around Europe, where people are protesting outside asylum centres, outside hotels where asylum seekers are being held. Why are these local residents protesting there and not protesting outside the office of the Home Secretary or the Interior Minister or whoever is responsible for the housing of the asylum seekers? If your problem is with the asylum seekers, then you should be angry with the person who put them there, not them themselves. They didn't decide to be put there. But then racists and bigots don't care about that. They just want to be angry with the person they see as the problem, not their own minister or government. If wages were crap, many won't come. Yes, and that's a very valid point as well, that if the wages are not good, then many people won't come. Now, the only caveat to that is that it seems that more and more people are not being attracted, but being trafficked to do really bad work, difficult work at very low pay. And because the Tories have undercut the civil service and reduced regulations and the enforcement of whatever regulations there are, made it more difficult for government officials to go out and check that people are being treated correctly, immigrants in particular. It means that many businesses, small businesses in particular, are able to get away with abusing their staff, and in some cases introducing a new type of slavery where people are being forced to work and told, yeah, I'm sending the money to your family directly, or I'm putting the money aside that when you finish your contract, I'll hand it over to you when you want to return to your home country. But I'm going to hold on to your passport so you can't leave, or I'm going to threaten to fire you or not to send you the money, to give you the money at the end if you don't work. And if the government don't invest in the resources necessary to deal with problems like this, then they're going to continue to happen. Thanks, Brad, for that. Very kind of you. So immigration is a good thing. We should be welcoming more people coming into the country because they're contributing to society. They're bringing skills with them that we don't have in the local area, and it makes for a better society. Are there bad people coming too? Of course there are, but there are bad people everywhere. So the argument that, well, there's one bad egg, we should stop everyone else coming in, doesn't make sense. You could apply that to anything. We have immigrants in Derry. Who knew? Free Derry. Is it in Free Derry? So guys, I want to say thank you so much to everyone who came on tonight. We're almost at the end of the stream for tonight. I want to say thank you to everyone who came on tonight. Thanks for smashing the like button. Thanks to everyone who sent a super chat. Greatly appreciated. Thanks to everyone who moderated tonight. Thank you for your support on the channel as always. And before we finish, we have our one for the road. So I want to say have a great week. I'll see you on Friday. Same bat time, same bat channel. And we'll talk more about what's happening during the week. But before we go, I hope you enjoy this.
Do you have a question about the summit? No, I haven't heard that story, but I'm afraid I'm focusing on my goals for this trip, which include strengthening the relationship. Of course, I'm aware of the story, but I haven't spoken to the minister about it yet. I'm focused on building our relationship. Look, this really isn't a big story. The minister has put out a statement saying that nothing untoward has happened, and I think that should put an end to it. Now, if we can just... No, there's no need for any investigation or inquiry. The minister was very clear that nothing untoward has happened, and I believe them. For goodness sake, normal people don't care about this. It's a very minor story, and it's simply not coming up on the doorstep. Can I just say that I have full confidence in the minister, and no further action is required. This case is closed. The investigation will be carried out by my ethics advisor, who will report back to me within a few days with his preliminary findings. Look, of course you wouldn't expect me to comment on an investigation whilst it's ongoing. Let's just wait for the results of the investigation. Now, if you'll excuse me, yes, of course I regret the fact that my ethics advisor appears to have been involved in the original story and has had to be replaced. But this does not diminish the confidence that I have in the process or my minister. No further action is required. The judge-led public inquiry will focus on three main areas: what happened, who knew, and why they tried to cover it up. We expect the inquiry to interview at least 24 witnesses over the next 12 to 18 months and cost at least £1.5 million. Seriously, guys, please can we talk about anything else? Having seen an early draft of the report, I think it's fair to say that it's not as bad as people were suggesting it would be, and I think we should all be content now to move on and allow the minister and the rest of the government to get on with the job. It is with deep regret that earlier today I accepted the minister's resignation. I applaud their work over the last 2 months, and I'm very sorry that this small issue has dominated so much of their time. I'm delighted to welcome our new minister to the cabinet. I'm sure we've all forgotten that they had to resign in disgrace just a few weeks ago, and I'm looking forward to seeing them getting on with the job. No, I haven't seen that story, but today I'm really focused on welcoming our new minister. Sorry, it's about this new minister. Oh, for
So well a braver man, so well a braver man. So guys, have a great week. I'll see you on Friday, same bad time, same bad channel. And as always, take care and be safe. Good night.